The weakness of exposure. The moment you feel the urge to explain yourself, you have already surrendered ground. Every unnecessary word reveals hunger. Every emotional reaction exposes dependency. Most people do not lose power because they are incapable. They lose it because they cannot endure silence. They speak to be understood. They defend to be validated. They react to be seen. And in doing so, they hand control to whoever provoked them. Human nature is fragile in this way. It fears being misunderstood more than it fears being manipulated. It would rather argue than be ignored. It would rather justify than remain mysterious. And that is why silence terrifies the untrained mind. When you rush to clarify your intentions, you expose your pressure points. When you rush to defend your name, you confess insecurity. So when you rush to respond to criticism, you announce that your emotional center lies outside of you. This is the first harsh truth. Most people are controlled through their need to respond. History has always favored those who understood restraint. In The Prince, Niccolo Machiavelli observed that power is not maintained through constant explanation, but through perception. A ruler who reveals every thought becomes predictable. A ruler who reacts to every accusation becomes weak. But the one who chooses when to speak and when to remain still commands the imagination of others. Silence creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates tension. And tension creates influence. Consider how quickly people unravel when ignored. A critic grows louder. An enemy becomes reckless. A manipulator grows impatient. Why? Well, because they depend on reaction to measure their impact. Remove that reaction, and they are left confronting themselves. The majority cannot endure being unseen. They equate visibility with value. They equate noise with relevance. And so they speak. They argue. They post. They explain. They leak their inner world into the hands of those who would use it. But the few who understand remain still. They recognize that every word is a strategic decision. They understand that explanation is not neutral, it is exposure, and exposure reduces leverage. When you master silence, you master perception. You choose what others know. You decide what remains concealed. You control the rhythm of interaction. This is not passivity. It is deliberate containment. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is the compression of it. And until you understand this, you will continue reacting, explaining, and slowly surrendering influence to those who provoke you. Chapter 2: The Psychology of Withdrawal. When you withdraw your voice, you do not disappear. You expand. Most people mistake silence for weakness because they are addicted to noise. They believe dominance requires volume. They believe authority requires constant assertion. But true control operates differently. It moves beneath the surface. It does not announce itself. It is felt. Withdrawal shifts the balance of power in any interaction. Imagine the moment someone expects your reaction. They provoke you. They criticize you. They test your limits. Their eyes search for the flicker of emotion that confirms their influence. And instead, they are met with stillness. In that stillness, their confidence fractures. Psychologically, humans seek feedback to stabilize their sense of control. When they do not receive it, their mind begins to speculate. Doubt enters. They question their approach. They replay their words. They wonder what you are thinking. And in that wondering, they surrender mental territory. Silence forces others to confront their own narrative without interruption. It denies them the reassurance of your emotional participation. This is why silence unsettles the manipulative and intimidates the insecure. It deprives them of leverage. Machiavelli understood that perception shapes reality. If people cannot read you, they cannot predict you. If they cannot predict you, they cannot control you. Withdrawal creates opacity. Opacity generates authority. But this strategy demands discipline. Yet you must resist the instinct to defend your honor in every moment. You must tolerate being misunderstood temporarily in order to maintain long-term leverage. The undisciplined react immediately. The strategic observe. When insulted, they do not flare. When challenged, they do not rush. They assess. They measure. They allow silence to do what argument never could. Destabilize the opponent. There is an internal dialogue that arises in such moments. A voice that whispers, respond, correct them, protect your image. That voice is fear disguised as pride. Power does not chase validation. Power allows perception to mature in its own time. The more you withdraw from emotional exchanges, the more your presence becomes weighted. Your words, when finally spoken, carry gravity. Because they are rare, because they are chosen, not because they are controlled. Those who speak constantly dilute themselves. Those who speak selectively define themselves. Withdrawal is not retreat. It is strategic distance. And distance clarifies hierarchy. When you do not compete for attention, attention gravitates toward you. When you do not argue for respect, respect becomes uncertain, and uncertainty breeds caution. This is the psychology of controlled absence. You are present, but not accessible. Observant, but not reactive. Calm, but not compliant. And that composure begins to reshape how others perceive your position. Chapter 3. Silence as structural power. Silence does more than unsettle individuals. It restructures social dynamics. In every group, there are those who fill space and those who command it. The loud compete for dominance. The silent redefine it. Observe carefully. The one who speaks first often reveals insecurity. The one who speaks most often seeks approval. But the one who waits, who listens without urgency, controls the tempo. Tempo is power. When you speak last, you absorb information others exposed prematurely. You understand motives before revealing your own. You gather psychological leverage while others spend it. Silence allows you to see patterns invisible to the reactive mind. You notice shifts in tone. You detect contradictions. You recognize ambition disguised as concern. And because you have not rushed to participate, you remain unentangled. Machiavellian strategy does not depend on brute force. It depends on timing. A delayed response can destabilize more effectively than immediate confrontation. And a measured statement can redirect a room more effectively than emotional outburst. Silence trains you to operate above impulse. This is where stoic discipline converges with strategic realism. Emotional control is not suppression, it is calibration. You choose when expression serves you and when it weakens you. Most conflicts escalate because someone could not endure a pause. Someone needed the last word. Someone feared appearing submissive. But the disciplined understand that silence is not submission, it is surveillance. You observe alliances forming. You sense resentment growing. You measure loyalty through reaction patterns. You let others reveal themselves fully. Then, when necessary, you speak with precision. Because you did not exhaust yourself in minor disputes, your intervention feels decisive. But because you did not dilute your presence with constant commentary, your words alter direction. Silence builds psychological mass. The longer you maintain it, the heavier it becomes. And in environments defined by ego and insecurity, psychological mass commands deference. Chapter 4. The Ascent into Quiet Dominance. Eventually, something changes within you. The urge to respond weakens. The need to correct fades. The hunger for recognition dissolves. You begin to experience a new form of authority, one that does not depend on applause or agreement. You realize that control begins internally. Silence is merely its external expression. There is a moment when someone attempts to provoke you, and you feel the familiar spark of reaction rise in your chest. But instead of feeding it, you contain it. Yet you let it pass through you without command. And in that moment, you experience mastery. Not over them, over yourself. This is the transformation few achieve. The majority remain emotionally accessible. Their moods fluctuate based on external stimuli. Their composure depends on validation. Their identity depends on response. But those who ascend into quiet dominance become self-governed. They are not cold. They are deliberate. They are not detached from reality. They are detached from manipulation. Their silence is not emptiness. It is structure. It is choice. It is strength under control. When they speak, it is intentional. When they remain silent, it is strategic. Nothing is accidental. Nothing is reactive. Over time, this discipline reshapes your identity. You are no longer the person who must be heard. Yeah, you become the person who decides when hearing is granted. This is power refined. You do not need to announce boundaries. Your restraint implies them. You do not need to demand respect. Your composure commands it. You do not need to defeat every opponent. Your unpredictability unsettles them, and so the cycle completes. You began as someone vulnerable to reaction. You become someone who governs perception. You began seeking understanding. You end creating uncertainty. Silence, once uncomfortable, becomes your instrument. Let others rush to fill emptiness. Let others argue for visibility. Let others exhaust themselves defending ego. You will remain composed. You will remain observant. You will remain disciplined. Guard your words as you would guard your position. Withhold reaction as you would withhold trust. Speak only when speech advances your design. And remember this final law. The one who controls his response controls the interaction. The one who controls the interaction shapes the outcome. The one who shapes the outcome never needed to raise his voice. Practice restraint. Strengthen awareness. Move in silence. Power does not shout. It waits. The psychology of withdrawal. The moment you choose not to respond, something inside you will tremble. You will feel the pressure rising in your chest, the instinct to correct, the urge to defend your name, the silent panic that whispers, "If I do not speak, I will lose." That voice is not strength. It is dependency, struggling for survival. Most people are enslaved by reaction. They are pulled by invisible strings, provocation, disrespect, accusation. And they answer instantly, as if silence would erase them. They cannot endure the discomfort of being misjudged. They cannot tolerate the thought of someone walking away believing a distorted version of them. But the truth is darker. The one who reacts first reveals the deepest insecurity. When you withdraw your voice, you do not shrink. You expand into psychological space they cannot reach. The absence of your response becomes heavier than any argument you could have delivered. It forces the other person into uncertainty, and uncertainty is a destabilizing force. Humans crave feedback to feel significant. When they provoke you, they are not only attacking, they are seeking confirmation. They want to measure their impact through your emotion. They want proof that they touched something inside you, while when they find nothing, no anger, no defense, no visible wound, they are left alone with their own projection. And that isolation begins to fracture them. Silence creates a mirror. Without your reaction to distract them, they begin to confront their own motives. Why did they say that? Why are they escalating? Why are they unsettled by your composure? Their mind starts searching for explanation, and in that search, control slips from their hands. This is the psychological shift. When you react, you give them clarity. When you remain silent, you give them confusion, and confusion erodes confidence. There is a quiet cruelty in this strategy, but it is not malicious. It is surgical. It is disciplined. It is rooted in self-command rather than emotional impulse. You are not punishing them, but you are refusing to participate in their emotional theater. Machiavellian awareness teaches that perception governs influence. If people cannot read your inner world, they cannot manipulate it. If they cannot predict your emotional patterns, they cannot weaponize them. Withdrawal creates opacity. Opacity breeds caution, but this path demands endurance. There will be moments when misunderstanding feels unbearable, when false narratives circulate, when silence feels like surrender. In those moments, your ego will scream for relief. It will beg you to clarify, to expose, to defend, and you must decide. Do you want immediate comfort or long-term authority? The few who understand choose the latter. They endure temporary distortion because they see beyond the moment. They understand that emotional self-control compounds, and every time you resist the urge to react, your internal structure strengthens. Every time you allow silence to stand, your presence becomes heavier. You begin to notice something unsettling. The more controlled you become, the more carefully others move around you. They sense the restraint. They sense the unpredictability. They realize they cannot easily provoke you. And without provocation, their leverage dissolves. Withdrawal does not make you invisible. It makes you untouchable. You are still present. You observe. You absorb. You analyze tone, posture, timing. But you do not reveal your conclusions prematurely. You do not waste words on those who seek emotional access rather than understanding. Your silence becomes selective, strategic, measured, and slowly the dynamic shifts. They speak more. You speak less. They explain. You observe. They escalate. You remain composed. The imbalance becomes obvious. Anyone watching begins to see who is governed by impulse and who is governed by discipline. This is the beginning of quiet dominance, not loud authority, not dramatic confrontation, but an internal steadiness so firm that it unsettles those who depend on emotional exchange to feel powerful. Withdrawal is not retreat, it is repositioning. You step back, not out of fear, but to reclaim perspective. You deny them the immediacy of your emotion. You deny them the comfort of your transparency. You deny them the satisfaction of visible effect. And in that denial, you regain control of the frame. Because the one who controls the frame controls the meaning. If they cannot force you into reaction, they cannot define you as reactive. If they cannot draw emotion from you, they cannot label you unstable. Your silence rewrites their narrative without a single spoken defense. This is where emotional weakness begins to die. You no longer feel compelled to win every exchange. You no longer need to correct every distortion. You begin to understand that power is not proven in the moment. It is accumulated through restraint. And as you practice this discipline, a transformation occurs within you. The urge to respond weakens. The fear of misinterpretation fades. The need to be understood by everyone dissolves. You become comfortable with ambiguity because you are no longer dependent on external approval to stabilize your identity. That is freedom. Not the freedom to speak endlessly, but the freedom to remain silent without anxiety. But when you reach this stage, silence stops feeling like suppression. It feels like control. It feels like a weapon sheathed at your side, unused, but always available. You are not voiceless. You are choosing not to engage, and that choice is power. The world is loud because most people are afraid. Afraid of being overlooked, afraid of losing status, afraid of irrelevance. So they compete through noise. You will compete through absence. Where they chase, you withdraw. Where they provoke, you observe. Where they escalate, you remain immovable. And in that immovability, you create something rare. Authority without aggression, influence without explanation, strength without display. This is the psychology of withdrawal. It is not for the impatient. It is not for the insecure. But it belongs to those who can endure internal tension without collapsing into reaction. If you can master this, you will notice a shift in every environment you enter. You will feel less urgency, less pressure, less need to prove. Your composure will precede you. Your restraint will define you. And those who rely on emotional leverage will begin to search for easier targets. Remain still. Let them reveal themselves. Let silence work in your favor. Because the one who refuses to react cannot be easily controlled. Silence as structural power. There is a moment in every room when power quietly rearranges itself. It does not announce the shift. It does not declare a victor. It moves beneath the surface, invisible to the distracted. And almost always, it moves toward the one who can endure stillness without discomfort. Most people experience silence as pressure. They rush to fill it. They speak to relieve their own tension. They mistake movement for control. They believe the first voice carries authority. It does not. The first voice often carries anxiety. Watch carefully. In meetings, in arguments, in negotiations, the one who speaks too quickly exposes urgency. Urgency signals need, and need weakens leverage. Words spill before strategy is formed. Positions are revealed before the landscape is understood. But the disciplined remain quiet, not because they have nothing to say, because they are measuring the terrain. Silence grants you information others surrender carelessly. Tone shifts. Micro-expressions flicker. Alliances reveal themselves through subtle alignment. In their eagerness to dominate the air, they expose their intentions. You gather, you store, you calculate. This is structural power. It is not about winning exchanges. It is about shaping the architecture of interaction itself. When you delay your response, you alter the tempo. When you control the tempo, you influence direction. When you influence direction, you determine outcomes. Most conflicts escalate because someone could not tolerate a pause. Someone felt compelled to answer immediately. Someone feared that silence would look like weakness. But silence, when deliberate, feels different. It feels heavy. It forces others to sit with their own words. It denies them instant validation. It magnifies whatever they have just revealed. And often, under the weight of that magnification, they begin to retract, to clarify, to over-explain. They weaken themselves trying to regain control. Meanwhile, you remain composed. Machiavellian realism recognizes that power is perception structured over time. The one who appears measured appears dangerous. The one who reveals little seems unpredictable, and unpredictability demands respect. If they cannot read you, they cannot corner you. If they cannot anticipate you, they hesitate. That hesitation is space, and space is advantage. There is also a deeper transformation occurring within you. Each time you resist immediate reaction, you strengthen your internal hierarchy. Emotion no longer commands behavior. Impulse no longer dictates speech. You begin to feel the separation between stimulus and response. In that separation lies sovereignty. You observe irritation rising. You observe the desire to correct. You observe the flicker of pride demanding recognition. And instead of obeying, you contain it. You allow the silence to stretch. At first, it feels unnatural. The air becomes dense. Others shift uncomfortably. They expect interruption. They expect rebuttal. They do not receive it. And something subtle happens. They begin to adjust their tone. They soften, or they grow cautious, or they attempt humor to dissolve the tension. They recalibrate themselves around your stillness. Your silence becomes the axis around which their behavior rotates. That is structural dominance. You did not argue. You did not threaten. You did not assert superiority. You simply refused to be pulled into their rhythm. The loud seek control through volume. The reactive seek control through immediacy. And the disciplined seek control through positioning. When you speak after sustained silence, your words carry disproportionate weight, not because they are louder, because they are rare, because they were preceded by observation, because everyone in the room has already revealed more than you have. And so when you finally choose to speak, it feels deliberate, it feels decisive, it feels final. This is why silence must never be accidental. It must be intentional containment. Passive withdrawal is not power. Strategic restraint is. You are not avoiding confrontation. You are choosing the moment of engagement. You are allowing others to commit themselves fully before you reveal your stance. In doing so, you see the structure beneath the surface. Who interrupts whom? Who seeks approval? Who avoids eye contact? Who overcompensates? Silence sharpens perception. It heightens awareness. It trains you to read dynamics rather than react to them. Most people drown in surface conflict. They argue over words. They defend against tone. They fight for dominance in visible exchanges. You operate beneath that level. You watch the pattern. You wait for overextension. You intervene only when necessary. And when you do, it is precise. There is no wasted language, no emotional leakage, no unnecessary explanation. You state what must be stated and return to stillness. That return is crucial, because power that lingers too long in expression begins to dilute itself. Power that knows when to withdraw remains intact. Over time, this discipline reshapes how others perceive you. They grow cautious in your presence, yet not out of fear of aggression, but out of uncertainty. They sense that you are not easily moved. They understand that provoking you will not yield spectacle, and without spectacle, many lose interest. This is how you rise without noise. This is how you influence without display. This is how you command without demanding. Silence becomes your structure. It frames conversations. It defines boundaries. It protects your internal world from intrusion. It forces others to reveal their positioning before you reveal yours. And the deeper you master it, the more effortless it appears. What once felt like tension becomes calm. What once felt like suppression becomes strength. You no longer feel compelled to prove intelligence through constant commentary. You no longer chase relevance through endless contribution. What you understand that visibility is not the same as authority. Authority is controlled presence, and controlled presence is built in silence. The world will continue speaking loudly. It will reward those who perform confidence through excess expression. It will celebrate the reactive and the dramatic. But beneath that surface, real influence gathers quietly, in pauses, in measured responses, in withheld emotion. Those who see clearly understand this. They do not rush. They do not overexpose. They do not surrender tempo. They let silence build mass around them until their very stillness alters the room. That is structural power, and once you feel it, you will never again mistake noise for strength. The ascent into quiet dominance. There comes a moment when you no longer struggle against silence, yet you inhabit it. At first, restraint felt like effort. You had to hold your tongue. You had to resist the rising heat of pride. You had to swallow the impulse to correct, to clarify, to defend your name as if it were under siege. Every pause felt like pressure against your identity. But discipline, repeated intention, becomes nature. Now the silence does not suffocate you. It stabilizes you. It feels like ground beneath your feet, while others lose balance on emotional terrain. This is the ascent. You begin to notice that you are no longer provoked in the same way. Words that once would have ignited you now pass through without anchoring. Criticism that once demanded response now appears small, almost predictable. You see the pattern behind it, the insecurity, the need for validation, the hunger for reaction. And because you see it, you are no longer caught in it. True dominance is not the ability to overpower others. It is the ability to remain unshaken when they attempt to overpower you. Silence becomes the shield that does not clang. It does not deflect loudly. It absorbs. It nullifies. It denies the aggressor the satisfaction of visible impact. Their force meets stillness and dissolves into it. There is a quiet intensity in this state. You are alert, but not tense. Aware, but not reactive. Present, but not exposed. You speak only when speech serves structure. You remain silent when silence preserves leverage. And gradually, others begin to sense it. They measure their words more carefully around you. They hesitate before challenging you impulsively. They search your face for emotional cracks and find composure instead. Your restraint becomes a boundary without announcement. This is power without spectacle. It does not seek applause. It does not broadcast authority. It simply exists, and because it exists, it reshapes behavior around it. Machiavellian awareness teaches that the most effective control is often invisible. The ruler who constantly asserts dominance invites resistance. The one who projects quiet inevitability invites compliance. When people feel that you cannot be easily read, easily provoked, or easily cornered, they adjust. Not because you demanded it, because your presence required it. This transformation is internal before it is external. You stop chasing the need to be understood by everyone. You accept that misinterpretation is temporary, but self-command is permanent. But you realize that defending every rumor weakens you more than ignoring it. You become selective. Selective with attention, selective with energy, selective with speech. And through that selectivity, your life grows cleaner. Fewer conflicts, fewer emotional entanglements, fewer unnecessary explanations. What remains are deliberate interactions, chosen engagements, measured expressions. You are no longer available for every battle. That is freedom. The majority remain trapped in cycles of reaction. They fight to protect ego. They argue to protect image. They exhaust themselves in exchanges that never mattered. Their energy scatters across trivial provocations. You conserve yours. You understand that power is not about winning every confrontation. It is about deciding which confrontations deserve existence. Yet many dissolve the moment you refuse to feed them. Silence starves chaos. It also sharpens clarity. In quiet moments, you hear your own thoughts without distortion. You recognize where you once overreacted. You see how much control you surrendered in the past through impulsive speech. That recognition is not regret, it is refinement. You are becoming harder to manipulate. Because manipulation depends on emotional access, it depends on predictable reactions. It depends on knowing which words will trigger you. When those triggers are dismantled, when your internal structure no longer collapses under provocation, the manipulator loses ground. And without ground, he cannot stand. Your silence, then, is not emptiness. It is sovereignty. You do not speak to prove intelligence. You do not argue to prove strength. You do not explain to prove innocence. Your identity is no longer negotiated in every interaction. It is anchored within. This anchoring changes the way you move through the world. You are slower to judge, slower to react, slower to reveal. That slowness is not hesitation. It is control over tempo. You decide when momentum begins and when it ends. And when you finally choose to speak, it carries weight because it is backed by restraint. There is no desperation in your tone, no emotional leakage, no need for immediate validation. Your words are clean, precise, intentional. Then you return to silence. That return is the final signal. You are not competing for the floor. You are not chasing dominance. You are demonstrating that you never needed to. This is the rebirth. You entered this path reacting to the world, yet you exit it governing yourself. You once believed power required constant assertion. Now you understand that the deepest power is often invisible. It is the power to choose your response. It is the power to endure misunderstanding without collapsing. It is the power to remain composed when others unravel. Guard this discipline. Refine it in private moments where no one is watching. Practice restraint when it is hardest, not when it is convenient. Let silence become a deliberate extension of your will, not a mask for fear. Move through conflict without haste. Speak with intention or not at all. Allow others to reveal themselves while you remain centered. And remember this final law. He who cannot control his tongue cannot control his destiny. He who governs his reaction governs the frame. Yet he who governs the frame shapes reality without raising his voice. Remain measured, remain aware, remain sovereign. Let your silence speak where noise never could.